In this lesson, we want to take a look at the gradient tool a little bit more closely. The first thing we want to do is we want to go to the gradient tool itself. It's here in about the middle of the toolbox. There you go. It's right there. And when we click on that, of course, what we end up with is, as with all the tools, the options bar changes to show things that relate to the gradient tool. So let's take a look at what we have here. First off, we have the gradient editor right here above the three little color buttons. And we're going to come back to this here in just a second to access the gradient editor. But first, Photoshop has several, actually 5 different styles of gradients. So you have those here, and you can pick any of them. I think the little icons are fairly self-explanatory. Then next to that, we have this group of filters I talked about in the layers palette, the same group of filters that affects how the pixels of the different layers interact, in this case when you apply a gradient. And so these are here. Then we have the opacity, the overall transparency or opacity of the gradient as it is applied. So there you have it. Generally, to go to the gradient editor to make some changes and things, we go right up here to the gradient editor, and we simply click on it, and that brings it up on the screen. And here it is. And once again, if you've worked with the gradient in Illustrator, it has all of the same basic functions, but it has some additional tools and things that make it a little bit deeper. So let's take a look. The first thing is, I had mentioned in the previous video, whatever your foreground and background colors are at any time. Right now mine are defaulted to the black and white. That is what the first gradient in the gradient editor here will always be, whatever the foreground background colors are at the time that you go to the gradient editor. So that's a good thing to be aware of. Then I'm going to click on one of these others here. There you go. And let's take a closer look at it. On the bottom, we have the little paint buckets. The paint buckets are where we add color. And I'm going to assume that, let's start from square one and not assume that you are familiar with Illustrator. And so these are the paint or the sources of the color. And you can double click on these little, what I call paint buckets. Okay? And it takes you to the gradient colors, or really to the color picker. And so we can here at any point pick a color, say OK, and there it is. We can add additional buckets or areas of color at any time just by clicking anywhere underneath the color bar here. We click and we can add another source of color or another bucket. And again, we can either click on it here, we can click here. Both places would take us to the gradient editor. And I'll pick another color, I'll say OK, and now you see you've got an additional color. We can remove paint buckets by simply clicking and pulling straight down, and they disappear. And again, we can add new ones at any time just by clicking underneath. And then to make some edits or to change how it behaves, we've got a couple of different things we can do. One is we can always slide the bucket of paint itself left and right, as you can see, and that's going to change how it looks and behaves. And then you always have one of these little diamonds, these diamonds in between each pair, like in this case from red to green, that's one pair, and then the green to blue is another pair, and there's a diamond in between. And the diamond is where one color starts and the other color stops. And so by moving that, you can see you either get a softer or a much harder edge. And so by moving the diamond as well as moving the paint bucket itself, we can make changes and edit it more or less. You've also got a couple of little things here. Noise adds sort of speckling to the gradient, and that's another thing that we can do. And when we want to then capture the gradient in with our swatches, unlike Illustrator where you drag it, what you do here is you click the new button. We can name it, but I must admit I usually don't bother, but we can if we like. Click it, the new button, and there you see our gradient has been captured. Now, there's another aspect to the gradients in Photoshop, and that is that we can add transparency into the gradient, into different areas of the gradient. That's what these little buckets on the top side of the color bar are for. Right now, each of these on top, it says opacity at 100%, meaning that we have the solid color. So let's go here. I'm going to say OK for a second. And I'm going to create a new blank layer. Okay. All right. I've got a blank new layer. And I'm going to go ahead and apply the gradient. And here we just simply click and drag it across the screen. And there you see the gradient applied, and it of course is opaque, and so it completely covered up the imagery underneath it. We can play with the opacity here as we apply the gradient. This will affect when we apply it. I'm going to select all of it and delete it, and now I lower the opacity up here in the options bar, and so when I apply it, there you see it's not opaque. It's a 42% transparency, so we can see through it, but it's even across the entire gradient. All right.